Going live. Here we are.
Are they as hot as
Here
my
we are.
Are they as hot as your
arms?
guns?
Yeah, good
Probably.
guns, good guns.
Oh, guns. Today was bicep day, so my guns feel good. So,
All right. So,
what is it?
welcome to Fireside Unscripted.
Apparently, it's Pink Drink Day on Fireside
It is
Unscripted.
Pink Drink Day.
I
So-
missed that memo.
Yeah, well,
We drink pink things.
get with the times.
It's not
It's not
Wednesday.
even Wednesday.
Go. Oh,
Oh.
cool. I've never seen that movie, but I still get the reference because it's made so often.
I've never seen it all the way through either. My kids have. I haven't seen it.
Oh boy. But that's not. We're not talking about that on this unscripted episode. What are
No,
we
it's
actually
not.
talking about?
We're talking about student loans.
Yeah, we are.
Awesome.
Or specifically student loan debt cancellation.
Student loan forgiveness.
Yes. But probably all things having to do with student loans because, surprise, surprise, we have feelings.
So many feelings. We're gonna get in them too. We're
Yeah.
gonna get in them feelings.
I'm going
All
to get
up
all
them.
in my feelings.
There will be
cannot wait
tears.
to be the rational person in this conversation.
What a terrifying thought that is.
Bite me, John.
Yeah. So I guess Savannah, you're the one who wanted to talk about this, I think, most. Well, not most, but you brought it up. How to put it? You fought most fiercely for this topic.
Yeah.
Y'all didn't put up much
recently.
of a fight, but yeah.
Well, I mean, before this week's discussion, you had mentioned it a couple of times.
Right,
as
it has
well.
ended
Yeah.
friendships before. And yeah, I would like to talk about it. However, I'm going to pause for a second because I have a child at the door. So I'm sorry, the timing was like really perfect.
Suspense. It's okay. We can take a whack at it.
Whack.
A whack with a WH. I guess really easy then. Full disclosure, I had student loans since that's what we're talking about. So that's going to be coloring my opinion on this a little bit.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to get essentially a full ride for my undergrad, thanks to acting. But it didn't quite cover everything. But I didn't have to take
Yeah.
any loans out. But for my master's degree, I definitely had to get a loan for that. And now I'm staring down the barrel of going back to school again. And I might end up getting a loan for that one. I'm not sure. We're gonna have to do some number crunching.
Yeah.
I would prefer not to get a loan for it. But the reality of the situation is my loan situation was pretty mild. Like I think I only ended up having to take out 15,000 total, and it was at a pretty reasonable interest rate, and I still struggled under those loans for a while. So
What's
we'll
a
get to
pretty
that.
reasonable interest rate?
I don't remember because I paid it off years ago and shut that memory into a deep, dark corner of my
Yeah.
mind, never to be opened again.
I
feel
have
like
closer
facts.
to the national average of student loan debt. And I have no idea what my interest rate is because it doesn't actually matter. It is going to be what it is, and I will pay them off as quickly as I can pay them off. But there's no reason for me to know it because knowing it's just going to piss me off more.
Well, I think we should level set with the fact that it's always difficult for people to talk about money. Money and politics seem to fire up people the most, and children.
Fair.
So if I ask you guys questions like, do you mind if I ask you guys questions about like how much your monthly payment is and stuff like that?
Yeah, I do. No, that's fine.
If you remember it, John, because evidently you don't remember any of it.
Oh no, I remember it. I don't remember the specifics of like my like interest rates and stuff like that, but I remember other things about it, like how it impacted me and why. So
Yeah.
but we just disclosed our history of student loans. So one person with them who has paid them off, one person currently paying them off, and then Savannah.
And then me, I have no student loans and I have 2 degrees. the GI Bill from the Marine Corps paid for all of my education, plus the military gives you tuition assistance while you're active duty. So I got the majority of my bachelor's with that. Yeah, I had enough to continue a master's, and then I still have more money if I want to go back and pursue another degree. Um, and how they do the calculations for the GI Bill pretty much means that yeah, you can get at least 2 degrees, if not more, if you like double up and do stuff, which is what I did. I took a significant amount of classes to save money and to be able to. But also to let you guys know about the GI Bill, it doesn't just pay the tuition. You also get a student a book stipend, and you also get housing. So you could literally just go to school and your rent is paid for, your tuition's paid for, and your books are paid for. That's all part of the GI Bill. So there are a bunch of rules and stuff like that. But yeah, that is why I didn't. It's one of the reasons I joined the military, was so I wouldn't have to take out student loans. And that is my relationship with student loans.
So I want to get into that at some point as well. But first, you were going to tell us like why you said this is like ruined friendships, ended friendships. Is actually the term used. So why are you so controversial, Savannah? What is your damage?
Well, besides the fact that I believe that myself and this friend cannot communicate about controversial, things that we disagree on.
Hey, we have a podcast about that. I can recommend it.
Right?
Right. There is a podcast about that. Besides that, which adds a layer of complexity, I don't really speak to people that have student loan debt. And so my stance on student loan debt is coming from a more of a you took out the loan, you should pay it off stance. However, when I would have these conversations, and I realize that is a completely, narrow-minded viewpoint, but whenever I would bring it up with the one person that would talk to me about student loan kind of stuff, he would end up calling me a narcissist, and the conversation would derail for months. So,
well, that is definitely not a healthy way to have a conversation about controversial topics, sir.
Right.
And
well, it wasn't until I started talking to other people and getting their viewpoints on stuff when I realized, like, obviously the interest rate of student loans is so astronomical. It is ridiculous. And I in the past year, I shifted my perspective from being like, you took out the loan, you should know what you're doing, to being like, yeah, those interest rates are fucked, and we shouldn't. If anything, the interest should not. All of the interest should be forgiven. That's more of the camp that I'm landing in now. Is that I don't believe that the student loan interest rate should be remotely respected, because like seeing the numbers of these people that are taking out these loans, paying the minimum payment, and then 10 years later they still haven't hit their principal, like not only is that completely demoralizing, and like what's the point? You're just creating a class of people who are forever in debt and can never buy a house and can never do all that stuff. So I'm just like, that is ridiculous. The interest rate, absolutely insane, predatory, all this kind of stuff, and I can totally get on board with that. But my belief that the original loan amount should still be paid off is where people think that I'm ridiculous. Oh, but also, and it does matter, I believe in free college. That is not like I believe the United States system should have free college. So that's not it. It's just more of these loans were taken out.
The responsibility for the decision you made.
Yes.
Not necessarily that the system itself is the correct system or applied properly. It's just that personal responsibility aspect of it.
Right. And I realized that my stance on it is coming from, and when we got into this argument, myself and this ex-friend, I was like, I made decisions that forever changed my life because I didn't want student loans. Like I ended up in a war zone So like, and that's very much like a, well, I've fucked over my life to not have student loans. And if I had taken out student loans and had just gone to college because I wanted to be a nurse in Georgia, like, and then realized that they would be forgiven later, if I had known that that would have been an option, it's very much a not a childish, but more of like a, that's not fair kind of thing. Cause
Yeah.
I did make these
Right.
decisions. So, yeah.
But
And I realized,
also you then are being compensated for the consequences of that decision now as well, whereas people who took out student loans, whether they understood what they were doing or not, are receiving zero compensation. Some are now under some of these program changes, but like, would your opinion be different if the government was not compensating you for the consequences of what happened when you were in a war zone?
well, they didn't compensate me for 11 years. So the compensation is not inherent to what happens to you. And the veterans who get compensated have to go through a bureaucratic nightmare to get what they have, quote unquote, earned. For like the disability portion for the GI Bill, even if you go through certain stuff, if you don't toe the line, you don't get the GI Bill. Like it is, again, it's a whole bureaucratic thing that goes beyond the scope of this, but not everyone who gets fucked over by things ends up with the GI Bill.
But
Well, no,
So
but like
wouldn't you
it
say,
on
uh, the way I see it though is that even though you're not guaranteed the compensation is available, right? Whereas like it is something that you could potentially qualify for if you did it right.
right.
Whereas with the student loan, the way I kind of see it is, especially with these astronomical interest rates, you you screw over your life a different way, but you still end up making a decision that screws you
Yeah.
over, and then you don't get any compensation after that to
Right.
sort of
yeah, I agree. I agree with
offset
There's
that.
that.
literally not even like financial counseling. And granted, I am not intimately acquainted with the kind of healthcare benefits and mental health care benefits and all of that veterans receive. So like, please know that I'm speaking from a place of significant ignorance when it comes to that. But like, there's not even financial counseling available other than like the mandatory internet thing that we had to go through in 2005 that said, yes, I understand I'm taking out a student loan. Like
Yeah.
there's no budget help, there's no walking through the process, like
They do not set
there's
people up for success in
That's true.
understanding
no,
what they're getting into. Yeah,
they
no.
don't. And so it's like I find myself interacting with people who very much take that line of, well, you made this decision, you should have to deal with the consequence, when they are also not dealing with the consequences of big decisions that they've made in their life. And so it feels very much like a not a valid point to me.
Yeah. And
Well, what do you mean by they're not, like, can you give me an example of stuff that they're not addressing
Well, so
or
like,
taking accountability for?
right. So they will gladly, for example, they will gladly accept disability benefits for a decision that they made that got them hurt. They are on lifetime disability. They will accept those from the government, but someone who took out a student loan because they made a decision should not get that same kind of benefit, right? Like everything we do in life is the consequence of a decision. And so if you want to boil it all down to you made this choice, you should have to deal with the outcome, then I think a lot of people would be in very different places in their lives.
I think a
Yeah.
lot of people, and I'm not saying this is you specifically, Savannah, but I think a lot of people with that mentality of this is your choice, you should deal with the consequences, are also benefiting from the fact that they may have made choices where the consequences included some sort of benefit before they made their choice. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, disability was in place before they made the choice that got them on disability, which, let me be clear, I'm not saying that that is an aspirational goal and something
No, no,
that is
no,
good, right?
no.
But
And I'm
if,
grateful that we exist in a place where that is a social safety net
right.
that we can take advantage of. Like that's
But
I'm 100% for social safety net
yeah,
programs.
I just wonder how those same people would feel if the situation were that we didn't have, disability safety nets, and the conversation were about implementing those at this point. Like, would they still be like, well, they made a decision, they rode their motorcycle without a helmet, so they need to just deal with the consequences of that instead of being a burden on society, quote unquote.
Right.
Because anybody who takes a payout from the government is a burden on society, to a lot of people, which is
Right.
fails to consider the whole calculus of the equation that like the offset might be that they
Yeah.
provide more to society than they're getting in benefit. But whatever, not the
Yeah.
point of
Or
this
even,
particular
just like the
conversation.
inherent value of a human being.
Yeah, that too. So, I was thinking in their language, but yeah,
Well, also,
Yeah.
there's a difference between wanting that utopian society where everyone exists as a human, and then, unfortunately, the capitalist nature of our country. And I'm not saying that human lives don't matter because of capitalism, but that is the system that we currently operate in.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
we trade time and health for money when you get right down to it. So
Yeah.
yeah, unfortunately.
that's
And
the
I'm
nature
also
of
like, this
capitalism.
kind of leads into UBI and the benefits that come from that, but that's not what, in a perfect world, we would not have 18-year-olds signing up for $50,000 worth of debt, not knowing what they are getting into, not necessarily having the parents that can teach them about that too. Like, because a lot of parents either don't know themselves or are too focused on putting food on the table to make sure that their kid's not signing up for this debt. So
Yeah.
it's flawed in all sorts of ways.
Yeah. So that's, I want to talk a little bit about, how I feel about this to keep framing the conversation out. So I took out, like I said, somewhere around the neighborhood of $15,000 in student loans. And when I took those out, I had a full-time job. I was going to work full-time and also going to school to get my master's. And they deferred payments until I had finished school. But some of the things they don't tell you is that interest accrues, or rather, it's not that they don't tell you, it's that you don't know to look for it if
Right.
you've never taken out a loan before, or if, like
Yeah.
me, you're just young and naive. That interest accrues over that period that you're not repaying the loan. So even if you do take out a loan for $15,000, by the time you start paying it back, you owe $19,000.
Right.
And then you're like, well, dang. So I actually really struggled working full time to pay my bills, pay my rent, pay my food, and pay my student loans back. And I had to like I had to talk to the not necessarily bill collectors, but the people, the representatives for the loan company, several times, because they're like, well, you didn't make your payment this month. And I'm like, yes, because there's no money to make the payment.
I
So
ate
I
instead.
ate that money. It's in
peanut
my
butter
body.
sandwiches.
Honestly,
but
that's
I
your
ate it.
problem. I can see that's where y'all went wrong.
Yeah, right. I chose life. Crazy. Basic
Gas.
necessities.
Capitalism is not about
What?
choosing life,
I
John.
should have fed the machine. You're right. And that is my moral failing as an
Yeah.
American.
Glad you see that.
The government that clearly needed your $150 or whatever
It was
that month.
$175 a month was my minimum payment, and so I started making that, and I think it was $175, somewhere in that ballpark. And so I made that payment for once I got into a different job. Ironically, not full time, but I still made more money, so I was more capable of making these payments. Weird. Once I got into that position and started making these payments regularly, and I made them on time every month, I made those payments for like 2 years, or maybe a year and a half, before I checked my balance, because I would just send the money. I had it on auto pay, so I just send it off and was just like, yeah, it'll resolve whenever it's paid off. So I finally went to check my balance to see where I stood and do some financial planning, and I still owed like almost as much as I had owed when I started making payments back. So I still owed just north of like $19,000 after making payments for
Mhm.
over a year. My balance just hadn't changed. I think I was throwing an extra like $5 or $10 a month at it. And so I called and I was like, hey, what gives? And they're like, well, your payments go towards interest first. So your principal keeps accruing interest at the same rate plus the interest that's on top of that. And even though I was paying down my interest, I was only barely getting into the already accrued interest from the delayed payments. So I actually hadn't hit my principal yet after a couple of years. And some people, and in fact, I didn't get to do any research. I just came across this story before we talked, but it was a gentleman who had made his payments. He had paid, $50 to $100 more a month for, I think he said 7 years, and went to check the balance, and he had only paid off 3% of his principal by that point.
Mhm.
And so, sorry to tie that up. Point being, I got really, really disillusioned very quickly with the entire like, well, I took out this loan. This is my responsibility. I need to pay it back because I thought I was doing the right thing by making my payments. I thought that the minimum payment that I was told would suffice to pay my loan back. I thought that that's all I would need to do and it would resolve itself. And to find out that the way these loans are set up are to keep you making payments for as long as possible to milk you for that profit for these companies. And mine was a federal student loan. So for the government, I mean, like, talk about radicalization overnight. I was like, this is bullshit. This is bullshit. Nobody should work to make their payments on time and responsibly and be going backwards, or at the best not moving. And
I agree. That is insane.
Yeah.
But does that not lend to the idea that the interest rate is the problem, not the loan?
Well, and I would agree with that, but I also agree with the general assertion that knowledge shouldn't be locked behind a paywall. So
Yeah.
I think college should be free because I think our entire society benefits with furthering education and allowing people to pursue educations that they want to.
Aren't you working on a patent to protect your intellectual property?
From other companies.
Yes,
From
and that's not
making a profit.
education. We are not preventing people from learning how to do what we're doing. We're preventing somebody from copying our direct technology. And that's a big difference. And I think you also have to factor in the college tuition inflation bubble, right? So we had the housing bubble. There has been a direct escalation in the cost of going to college over the course of 40 years, where the value of that college degree has not increased to pace. So we have entire generations of people, starting with Gen X, myself being an older millennial, who were told the only way to be a successful human being is to go to college and to get a degree, at least one, if not two. I have two.
Do we all have two?
And
We
then
all have two. There's 6 degrees
do.
on this pod.
Fantastic.
And so, like, we were basically taught that is the barrier of entry to adult professional society. And so in our heads, like, that's a cost of being an adult. There's a cost.
There was no
doing
other
business.
option.
Yeah.
There was no other option.
Explicitly told that I needed a college degree to get a good paying job by multiple people. And here's the kicker. It didn't matter which degree I got as long as I had one. That companies just looked for the degree, not the subject matter, which I thought was, which I believed because, again, young John was very trusting and naive.
Yeah.
So.
Did they also tell you that companies cared about your college transcripts?
Yeah. And high school.
Which puts pressure. Not only that, like, I have a lot of feelings, especially when you layer onto that the pressure of being the first person to get a college degree.
Mhm.
in your immediate family. And then that pressure of like, well, companies are going to look at your grades. So you better make sure that you're doing this in a way that you can excel, which generally for most people means not working, taking a full load so they can get it done with as quickly as possible and get out into the working world. Like the deck was just stacked in such a way that we were primed for this kind of predation. And
Oh yeah.
it's predatory. It's 100% what it is.
Yeah. So to your question earlier, Savannah, yeah, I think the interest rates are definitely the problem in our current setup. Again, a setup that I don't agree with,
Right.
even without
I
the
don't
interest
think
rates.
any of us.
But that is also why I think that the forgiveness should be more than just the interest rates. Because I could see a world, and we're all talking about hypotheticals now because no plan has been floated to
Right.
forgive student loans, but I could see a world where the interest rates were forgiven, but the amount paid wasn't applied towards the principal. So people were basically just starting back at zero, which I think is incredibly unfair as well. And I think or not at zero, whatever amount they loan.
Right. At
Um,
basic.
yeah. And then, and I think the contract, I really believe that the contract that these kids or young adults sign for these massive amounts of money are, if not legally void, they're morally void because you take out a loan for X amount
Yeah.
and you're told, well, yes, there will be interest and you'll have to pay back a little more or you'll have to pay back more, but that's how the company like makes money and that's how you pay for the loans. And, it seems reasonable at the time, but the actual agreement, you end up paying back 2 or 3 times the amount that you took out. And suddenly, like that's not what I agreed to. I didn't agree to pay back $100,000. I agreed to pay back $50,000 for my degree.
But you agreed to the terms of the loan.
You did, but also think, well, you wouldn't know because you didn't have student loans, but the way
No,
that
I'm
they're
saying that.
presented,
Okay.
like the way that they're presented to you is in bits and pieces. So every semester, I had a different loan
Yeah.
for each one of my different loan programs. I had different paperwork for my Pell. I had a different paperwork for this loan and that loan. And the numbers are small. So even when you look at that MPN and they show you like, if you pay this back in 10 years, this will be your total, you're looking at $2,500 and $4,000, right? When you are 21 years old and you have no business making these decisions, that looks like nothing to you. That's less than your car cost. But
Why do you say
what
that 21-year-olds don't have business doing stuff with money like that?
I had no sense. I had 0 sense, 0 education.
Same.
I had no business making those decisions.
I mean, think about it this way. Banks say the same thing. You could not go to a bank as a 21-year-old and get an unsecured loan for $20,000, $30,000, $50,000
right.
from
They
anywhere.
will
They
not.
would not do that.
Absolutely not.
As a 19-year-old, I was in charge of $500 million worth of equipment. And
Because you were in a completely separate society. Like that is a completely different operating system than the
Still no
everyday
training.
civilian society. But they don't care because you're collateral. Right? Like they teach you to do what you need to do to handle your stuff. They don't teach kids
No, they don't teach
what
you.
they need to know how to handle this stuff.
They don't teach you in the military either. But that I take issue with the fact that 19-year or 20-year-olds or 21 have no sense in handling that kind of stuff. I think
I should have used a personal pronoun instead of a plural pronoun because I at that age had 0 business.
But again,
0. Like the royal we mouse in my pocket, whatever.
Like, but I still stick by the assertion that no bank is going to give a 19-year-old a loan for a college degree without securing it. And these are unsecured, relatively, some of them are very high interest loans that are being given to these late teenagers, early 20-year-olds that they cannot get. Can you define
unsecured? Can you define unsecured for our listeners that might not know what that is?
Thank you. No collateral, no way for that payment to be forgiven or taken by the loaning institute.
Essentially, you don't have the income and the way to pay it off. They haven't proven your worth, not worth. Maybe.
If for an actuary, that might be part of how they
literally your net worth does not
it's your net worth.
the cost of the loan.
They don't check that at where they do with stuff like mortgages and stuff like that. No, I just wanted to make sure that the listeners were understood that portion of loans, because I did not know that until this past year too, that they were unsecured. So.
Yeah. And they present them to you in small pieces. Each, like, I think when I consolidated my loans, I had something like 31 separate loans, right? So when you're looking at that paperwork, the number that is on that paper is not scary. When you consolidate it, it's terrifying. If they were to roll them up every time you got a new student loan and you could see that total, I think that we would have a very, very different situation on our hands.
Do you think it's purposefully broken up, or is it just because there's so many different programs that have their hands in the bucket?
I have a hard time assigning intentionality to things where I can't demonstrate that there's intentionality. I'm really leery of saying, well, they meant to do this, they meant to do that, but it would not surprise me at all if that was the intention.
I think there are too many individual, like people talk about big bad government. I think it's so bloated and so many different things are moving that no one really knows what's going on. And so to me, I don't think that there's intentionality behind it. It's not like let's fool the dumb 18-year-olds. It's just a system that was put into place, became what it was, and it turned out to be an awful system.
I try to be cautious, but I would not be surprised.
I think from a marketing, from a sales perspective, because that's what it is, you're selling these things, I think it makes sense for the companies doing this to not go out of their way to assess the financial situation of the people that they are selling their product to. But I don't think anybody's going out there saying, yes, let's sink them into as much debt as possible and milk them for life. It's just, we're also not going to do anything to keep them from doing that. And if they do that, that's good for us and bad for them.
And this is a profitable business line. So let's make it as accessible as possible. It's exactly what they did with mortgages back in 2005, 2006, 2007, right? When everything came crashing down. This is really profitable. Let's make it as accessible as possible to as many people as possible so we can keep making profit. I don't think that there is that direct malicious intent of causing harm, but I believe there absolutely is the intent to make it as easy as possible to participate.
Who are some of the companies that these student loans come from? There's Freddie Mae and whatever.
They all end up back at Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae.
Yeah.
But like mine were through Great Lakes, which is like you can just like go to their website basically and just sign up, and they're like, yeah, here's $5,000.
Oh Jesus.
And you're like, oh cool, great. I'll just do my thing.
I literally have no idea who mine were originally through. They were all government service loans.
But so the government service loans are those two Freddie, Fannie companies, right? So you guys say that it is profitable. Have either of y'all done any research into where that money actually goes? Because the schools do need to get paid, quote unquote. Have you done any research into
the loan companies do not pay the schools. The schools are paid by your tuition.
Right, so the schools are getting paid by your tuition, which is the money that just comes directly into your account, and you can actually do whatever you want with it, right? There's no like checks of what you're doing with the money, right?
Depending on
they're supposed to be.
Depending on how the loan is given to you. Sometimes the loan goes directly into your bank account and you transfer the money over to the school, and sometimes the loan goes directly to the school, which I think is the.
You just told me that they don't actually pay the schools. I would like you to do a retraction.
No, they don't make money off of the loans. Don't put words in my mouth and change what I said.
The way that mine worked, they went through the school account first, and then all of the overage went directly into my bank account.
Yeah.
Which is what paid for books and room and board and my children's formula by the time I graduated college, because I had 2 kids by the time I graduated. So like that's That is the process. So the school did get paid first, but at that point in time, they were also very much encouraging people to apply for the max that they needed to
Right.
Who is
exist during
they?
their college. My student, the people in the financial aid office.
Yeah. So
Of
financial aid
your
offices
schools.
in the schools will tell you,
Mhm.
they will, at least in my experience, might not be universal, it might not be the same as it was when I went, but they will absolutely tell you, you know, this is how much you need for tuition, but we recommend taking this much out to cover room and board, to cover your books, to cover these ancillary expenses. And that way you don't have to work, or you can focus on your
Right.
studies, or you can
Or I
cover
see you're,
unexpected payments.
It
or
seems
I
like
see you're taking a full load or full load plus. Clearly you're not working, what other income?
That's a
Like,
lie.
So it seems like it
yeah.
is well-intentioned advice to ensure that college students don't starve, but the financial aid office, who is supposed to offer financial aid and hopefully some literacy with this financial aid, was still neglecting to tell students the implications of what they were doing.
I don't know
So
that they understood the implications.
Yeah.
Literally, our financial aid office was staffed by kids who worked at the school. They were work study kids.
see, I mean, where does the ultimate responsibility lie when we talk about accountability of student loans? Is it the person who takes out the loan that, might not understand the loan terms? Is it the companies that set awful loan terms? Is it, parents for not helping their children or being unable to, that whole thing?
Can
Where,
I
Mhm.
ask you why one person has to be ultimately responsible?
Oh, because I deal with people that think in black and white and they don't like shaking up the accountability.
Oh,
Yeah,
Well,
I
you
think
see that when people in headlines, that's what they say is like it gets turned into this person's responsible, like this person's responsible, but it could be all of them, John.
yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that it's kind of everyone's colossal fuck up. And unfortunately, the people who suffer and ultimate are lower and middle class people, which means that it messes up their whole entire life structure, impacts their children, it impacts, like, it is, a cascading
yep,
impacting. So
Yeah.
yep.
why are you smirking, John? I wish people who are on the podcast could hear
I wasn't smirking.
or see this.
I was actually agreeing with what you were saying. I wasn't
That's
smirking
probably
at
why you
all.
were smirking. It's because we were agreeing.
No, I don't even know what look I was making. I'm so sorry. I was looking at you. It was definitely not
Yeah,
a
I was
like,
looking at you
got
too. I
her.
didn't see it.
I convinced you. What's up, Socratic method for the win? Like, that's
What do you
definitely
mean?
not what that
I'm
was.
the one that's asking questions here. You're the
I
one
believe I
talking.
asked you why one person had to be ultimately responsible, and you ended up going off there.
I was
So
leading that way.
So I think that's one point in my Socratic.
Didn't I begin?
basket
Wait,
there.
no, wait. I started the questioning with asking,
You
whose
said who?
responsibility
You
is it?
said which one person is ultimately responsible, and I was like, why does
what
it
I
have
said
to
at
be
all.
one? And you were like,
We're gonna have to
that's what I was getting at. And I was like, yes, this is all due to my brilliance in questioning. So
That's
you just
not
need
how
to
that works
understand
at all.
how incredibly salient my line of questioning was, Savannah. Respect.
Better be lucky you're in Washington, because I would 100% sock you for. That was where I was going with it. God.
No. Oh gosh, it's so fun to get you riled up because you try to do it to me all the time.
And it works.
It does work. You get me. Like, I don't like. It's not like you're. It's not like I don't respond. But
I was gonna
in
be
fact, I think
rational.
you get me more often than I get you. So anyway.
I want you to know that some of the listeners say that you're pretty hard on me, and I'm like, is he? Because I feel like I'm a dick back. So I don't know.
Some of the listeners are like that one chick who thinks that John's annoying.
That's true, though.
Hey, I don't want to give up my sources here, so
I
it's
do.
That one chick.
That one chick. I am. But the thing is, just like out of this conversation, but like I do challenge you, but like it's a two-way street, and you hit me back just as hard, which is why, like, before you were ever asked to be on this podcast, that's one of the reasons I thought about you, was because of like, we have good conversations, and like, I'm not afraid to be like, hey, but did you think about this? And that seems like it's not fully, oops, punched my mic. That's not fully thought out. And you're like, hey, did you think about this, dumbass? And I'm like, well, you got me there. So
Right.
like,
I think we balance it well together,
I
and
think
poor
it's
Robin
fine.
just has to listen to it.
For everybody listening, we're both very happy in this relationship. So
Anyway, so let's
Anyway.
talk about. I'm actually curious to see what you guys think should happen with the student loans. Like, what's your method of quote unquote getting rid of them? Have y'all thought about that?
I
I
mean,
think we're making good progress.
hmm,
I think
How?
the changes that have been made to some of the programs that were designed to offer relief, especially like the public service loan forgiveness programs, and the changes that were announced to the income-based repayment programs.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was actually today that they made that announcement. Um, there's something like 43 million people who are on income base, or sorry, there's 43 million total student loan borrowers, um, and there are a 4.4 million of them who were on an income based repayment program that was supposed to be working toward paying off that loan. The way that that program worked was that they would essentially count your payments toward your total, but not dollar for dollar, right? So it was supposed to like adjust the total amount that you ended up paying based on how much income you earned. And there were about 4.4 million people who were participating in that program. And a recent report by I think it was NPR turned out that 32 people out of that 4 million actually had their loans paid off in the progress that they were supposed to have. Like the
yeah.
process was completed properly and they were able to pay off their loans that way.
But NPR's reporting, like, I wanted to dig into it a little bit more because that program was for people who were paying off their loans um, from 21 to 25 years. And the
Mm-hmm.
number that had been forgiven of 22 were just after 20 years. So I'm wondering if, the millions of other people just haven't hit the 25-year mark. It just seems
And
like
it's possible. It's
yeah.
possible. But the purpose of bringing that up is just that the systems in which we are supposed to be able to pay these loans back to the government, right? I'm not talking about private loans. I'm talking about the United States federal government. The processes through which we're supposed to be able to pay these off in a way that offers a little bit of relief are so broken and so inconsistent that it's not being accomplished. So
Mm-hmm.
the revisions that they've announced to the program today in reviewing it and in giving credit for people who have been in forbearance when they should have had lower payment rates and things like that, I think are going to go a long way toward offering some relief. But the question of what should we do is that's a really difficult one, you know? It's
Yeah.
got far-reaching impact on the federal economy. I mean, there's like $1.5 trillion in federal student loans out there.
What my not friend anymore said was that it doesn't matter about the trillion to him he was like the money just doesn't matter, that trillions of dollars doesn't matter, it can be wiped away in a second. And I'm like, I feel like that's not as simple as, like, he's like, Biden just needs to get rid of all of it, and I'm like, that's not how it works. But um I am also curious. John, do you have what? Why are you looking like? I really hope people get this YouTube feed so people
Well,
can see your
I was thinking
face.
about what your friend was saying, thinking to myself, well,
Yeah.
that doesn't like it's a pipe dream. It's like $1 trillion as frequently as the government seems to just throw around funding requests for $3 trillion, $4 trillion, and spend $1.3 trillion on infrastructure improvement or whatever it is. Like that's it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for
It
the U.S.
is.
government. It's a lot of money for the world, let
Mm-hmm.
alone any government.
Yeah.
So I think that
And it's
just
still debt that has to be serviced at some point,
Yeah.
somehow.
I was just thinking that seems like a very, I can understand feeling that way. I certainly understand why people would want all loans just forgiven. I have too many friends that are, mid-career adults with children that they're trying to put through school that will be entering college soon, and they haven't even begun to scratch their own student loan debt. So we're trapping not only the parents, but likely these children into this generational debt. And you can't declare bankruptcy to get out of these loans.
I thought you could.
Cannot.
No.
They have to be private. Federal student loans you cannot declare bankruptcy on.
And
okay. Yes, this person does.
Most of them, I'm fairly certain the vast majority of student loans are federal. But again, I didn't research, so
92%.
And it also impacts the ability.
I have my note card.
It impacts the ability for people to buy houses.
Right.
It does.
So that's
that debt. It gets calculated.
That is that's one of my things here is you can't declare bankruptcy to get out of it, which is a tool that we provide every other person
and business
for every other kind of debt, right? If you just got in over your head, it sucks. It's gonna stink for your life for a while, but declare bankruptcy, give yourself this fresh start, and go, right? You might end up back in debt because maybe you didn't learn anything in your life when you got into that debt, but at least there's that option available. There's an off-ramp. It's an ejector seat, but it's something. For this, we don't have that. And that is a little bit crazy to me. And for that reason, I think it needs to be just a little bit more than merely forgiving the predatory interest, even though that would be a great first step. If we were able to say, okay, these loans back to X date, despite what the stated interest rate was, the calculated interest rate for repayments for that loan from that date are going to be 0%. And therefore, every payment you make goes to principal, right? I think that would be a fair resolution. A lot of companies would end up suffering, but I think I find it very difficult to make.
Couldn't they just file for bankruptcy?
Sorry, say again.
They can.
Couldn't they just file for bankruptcy?
They sure could.
They can.
I find it very difficult to make a moral argument, a morally defensible argument for keeping companies in business that only exist because they keep millions of people in extreme debt.
Would you say that student loans is the modern slavery? Controversial opinion.
I would not.
I don't think.
Not by any stretch of the imagination.
Forgive me as I calculate a more nuanced answer. I don't think emotionally or generationally or culturally it is anywhere close to being the same as slavery. I think the downstream results can look similar, though, where we're talking about generational debt, where we're talking about the inability to improve your situation because of decisions made by other people, like your parents, right? So no, it's not. It's not modern day slavery as we imagine slavery to be. But I think if you go far enough downstream, you're going to be hard pressed to make a compelling argument that the lasting impacts are very different.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we could go to the modern day equivalent of serfdom, or a more modern equivalent of the situation that many miners and railroad workers found themselves in, where the companies loaned them all of the money that they needed for their supplies, and then they ended up never actually earning their own income and being basically indentured servants. But I feel like maybe it's just white people who are willing to say that student loans are modern day slavery, and that's pretty controversial, and I'm sorry, but
I was just asking. That is not my viewpoint.
I think it's probably
Please know that is like I have had that said to me as well.
Yeah. Who could have said that, Savannah? I think that's a particular
that one
brand
person
of white person who wants to have like the ability to be like, oh, but we suffered as well, so you know why do you keep
oppression
complaining?
I don't know.
It is this compulsion that I think a lot of people have to identify with oppression.
Yeah.
That they've never experienced. They want to be oppressed so hard.
They want to be able to. Well, they do. I think they want to be able to say that, like, well, I've been oppressed too, and I don't bitch about it. So why are you complaining? Like,
it's a flavor of bootstraps.
Well, there's that, and then there's like this whole collective anxiety, collective oppression, collective feeling that I feel like I see reflected a lot in popular culture right now.
Yeah.
Where everyone needs something to be oppressed about so they can identify with everyone else who feels oppressed. But that's just a whole other rant that we won't get into because we're talking about student loans.
What's it called? Grievance culture. I think that's.
Yeah, grievance culture, trauma porn, oppression porn.
Yeah.
Victim culture.
Victim culture. That's it. Victimhood.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm so sorry, but it was a good segue into it. The serfdom point, I think one of the problems we're seeing is that even though it might not be intentional, there are a lot of people that see the byproduct of these student loans being, or the threat of these student loans, and that is like it drives people into the military because they don't want to suffer under that.
Right.
So
it
creates a feeder stream into the military.
We talked about this last week.
Yeah.
And
if you don't have those people, if you don't have that pipeline, where does your fighting force come from?
Exactly. You need desperate people in order to have, unfortunately, and this is not to say that everybody in the military is desperate, but a lot of people are.
What do you mean? I'm pretty sure like it's like 98%. Like we're all the island of misfit toys. We come from
some people enter the military out of a strong sense of patriotism and duty.
One person. Okay, look, I looked this up because I was like, why do people join the military? And there's some random study that's like, people join for patriotism. And I'm like, who the fuck paid these people off? This is a false study.
Yeah. Like,
they're Britain anyway. I don't agree with
there's one guy in every platoon. He's the token patriot.
And they're annoying as fuck, and no one actually likes them. And they have that. They have an American flag hanging on the back of their.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Anyway,
but also, but even if people don't join the military, the student loans are a way to ensure a workforce as well. If you have taken a student loan out, you must therefore work to make those repayments. And therefore, that means that you have a motivated workforce for low income or, shall we say, low status jobs, you know?
You could say blue collar.
Well, I think
it's different. There's a big difference because like some blue collar workers make more than I do.
Oh yeah.
Plumbers, man, he charged me $400 and didn't fucking fix the toilet. You think I'm not butthurt about that blue collar? I got swindled.
Well, I mean, yeah, like the fiber optic cable pullers and the line pullers at the utility where my husband used to work made 2 and 3 times
what the guys splice. That is
I mean,
they can splice fiber.
That is.
But that's on the job training. That's no prior education. Like that's why I say that blue collar is not necessarily low income or low wage earner,
or even
they make fucking bank.
Yeah, and I would argue that the only people who think blue collar workers don't get respect are people who watch too many sitcoms or believe the perceptions about coastal elites or big city folk and want that sort of class warfare.
I'm in a coastal city.
Yeah, we're both coastal elitists, Savannah, and Robin's the only one here with her head on straight, clearly, as she lives in the Midwest where God lives. So,
I do currently, but
but
Well,
no, but like my point is like there's this trope about blue collar workers need to be respected and dirty jobs with Mike Rowe. So you can see how these hardworking individuals who don't need to go to college make money, and you should respect them. It's like I don't. Who doesn't respect? Who teaches? Who taught their kids not to respect blue collar workers? It was
yeah,
like
I mean,
it's
please,
middle
please
class
come do
suburban
something
people.
I don't know how to do. Let me pay you all the money to come
I'm
do it on
like in
holiday.
awe watching a plumber work. He's like, oh yeah, no big deal. Or an electrician.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mad respect.
Electricians deserve everything because they're fucking with God's might.
That's magic right there.
Yeah.
Electricity is
It
really
is.
just
Scary
codified
as shit.
black magic. That's all it is.
That's accurate.
So, leading back to student loans directly, I had a question for you guys to see how you would believe of all student loans being forgiven, or should there be limitations to it, or just guidelines to it? Like, say your undergrad, your first undergrad, a degree that you have to be working in the field for. What do you think are some guidelines, if any, that should be encouraged for the student loan debt forgiven? To put some context,
Oh
never
no.
mind. I'm not going to give context.
Don't.
No, I'm not.
I know what you're getting ready to say. I don't think
I'm good.
a random person may or may not have returned to school to pursue another degree and decided that they didn't want to pursue that degree and got themselves into a massive amount of debt.
But again, that's choices, and we go back to, people do make choices. They do make choices that they fuck up with. I know I have done many. So
I do think, to that point, I do think it sucks that people will go to school and have to spend a lot of money before they realize that they don't want to do this anymore. Like my mom didn't realize she didn't want to be a psychologist until she was in her like senior year doing her practicums in psychology. And then she was like, wow, this is not for me. So she has a degree. She has a bachelor's in psychology that she never used. You know? So
I had 3 different majors before I picked one that would get me out quick.
Well, do you guys see that there should be any guidelines, or should it be a erase, reload? Oh God, I just made a nerd joke that no one's gonna get. All right. Should we just wipe out everything? Could you edit that out of the podcast?
No,
please?
it's staying in. This is unscripted. They're getting it all.
Your nerd flag's flying.
It's so hard. Like part of me wants to say, sure. Like why not? Why like if I try to draw an arbitrary line, there's always going to be somebody on the wrong side of the line that deserves to have their debt forgiven as well. Yeah. And I'm going to be like, well, no. And like my poor little soft heart can't handle that thought. And so I'm just like, just wipe it out. And then we've got all of these people who have suddenly freed up a bunch of financial resources that will then probably make its way back into the economy because poor people spend money. Rich people don't spend money, but poor people do because they have to survive.
Yep.
And I would say that, the whole idea of like disability queens and stuff like that, if you want to go to the podcast that y'all had done on disability, people who quote unquote abuse. Yes. The idea of like,
queen.
The idea of that, like there will be people who abuse the system, but at the end of everything, it is seemingly rare. And it would benefit more people if we didn't have arbitrary rules placed around it.
I don't understand. Like, I can't think of a way that you could abuse student loan debt forgiveness.
Continuing to be a student, a person that goes to school repeatedly and doesn't actually go into the workforce.
Yeah.
Well, but that would necessitate that this is an ongoing and perpetual process versus a one-time wipeout.
Yeah,
okay. So you think a one-time wipeout, and then
like, I mean, I am in the camp that all undergraduate education should be free.
Yeah.
Like I am fully housing? In that camp. Housing is housing, right? So if you want to live on campus, I'm not opposed to I'm not opposed to there being costs for housing and food, and those are all hard costs, right? Um, but I believe that tuition, the money that I pay for a credit hour, should be part of my taxpayer dollars in the United States of America. Granted, we could probably go into a lot of detail about how universal education programs work, and they're complicated, and I'm not saying that they're not. But I don't know that it would need to be an ongoing debt forgiveness situation if we could implement universal secondary education.
So it's a multi-step plan. Eradicate the debt, have initial degrees be free, and get these people into a fulfilled, not serfdom lifestyle.
Right. So, I mean, if you want to go for a master's degree, we can talk about that kind of stuff. But I think there are plenty of countries throughout the world that do this and do it well, that we can look to for a standard, for a precedent. But I don't. Yeah. I don't see a reason not to. I mean, other than needing to figure out the sweeping economic impact of adding $1.6 trillion to the national debt, which we seem pretty damn willing to do these days. I don't see a reason why that I pissed her off.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to happen.
Kicked her out. Crazy.
She was like, fuck you.
Yeah, I think if we're going to do student debt forgiveness, then it needs to come hand in hand with, if it doesn't come with free universal secondary, wow. If it doesn't come with that, with secondary, then there needs to be a restructuring of how we do student loans. There needs to be, oh shoot, what is that thing that the government does to limit how businesses do business that conservatives hate?
Regulations?
Thank you. All I could think of was restrictions. Regulations. There needs to be regulations on how companies give loans, right? How they are allowed to issue loans. I think that interest rates need to be capped at X amount, right? Like 1%, a nominal interest rate. At the massive amount of debt or loans that are given out every year, that's still going to be able to keep a company afloat.
Yes.
Would it be able to send its CEO home in like a limo every day? Maybe not.
Limos are so 1990s. You know no one does limos anymore, right?
An air limo called a helicopter.
Okay.
Exactly.
No,
I think the idea that education should be highly profitable is inherently flawed.
Yeah, I do too. But if we are not going to overthrow that, if we're not going to make it free, then there needs to be some sort of regulation applied to student loans in order to make it as like I can take out a loan on my house and it is worth at least, I'm trying to do mental math and it doesn't work, but like there's no calculator up here. I'm just staring into space. But like it's worth, we'll just throw out like 10 times what I paid for my college education. And oh no, what I paid for my college education is actually worth closer to like 30 times that.
Yeah.
And I'm still going to get it paid off in 30 years, less than 30 years actually, because the way the mortgage is set up and the way that it like works and is explained, I can make my payments and I know the schedule and I know exactly when it's going to be paid off and it's all laid out before me. If I make a minimum payment, I know the date it's going to end. If I make a minimum payment on some of these loans, it will literally never end.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people are not considering in their discussion of the economic impact of canceling existing student loan debt, is that there's an entire category of people who are out there saying, fuck it, they're never going away. I'm paying as little as possible for as long as possible because I will die with these.
Or just not paying at all.
Yeah.
Or just not paying it off. I mean, none of us have been paying student loans for almost 2 years now, right? Because all student loan payments have been put in kind of like mandatory forbearance. They've all been suspended.
A lot of, but like interest is still accruing on those, right?
Oh, interest is still accruing, but when you're dealing with groups of people for whom that payment makes the difference between paying all their bills in a month and not paying all their bills in a month, they don't care.
Interest doesn't matter. I have a friend. I just want to say I have a friend who actually made the decision to tank his own credit score and just not pay his student loans off because they're not he's been making payments on them for decades, and he's like, I cannot pay them off.
I cannot imagine that this setup is profitable for the United States government, considering the categories of people who take out student loans. Like the number of people who are in these income-based repayments or who have been in forbearance for more than 3 years because they can't afford their student loans. What is the actual impact? And
here's something they don't tell you about those income deferred repayment plans is sometimes, not always, but sometimes, if you get on an income deferred repayment plan, the payments that you have agreed to make don't even pay the interest.
Right.
So you pay and your balance goes up.
Yeah. Yeah, there are some programs like there are the ones that
it's fine.
It's the worst. It's
I was just gonna make a joke, and I was like, maybe you should just stop being poor. No, the Paris Hilton meme.
Go grab your bootstraps.
Stop being
poor.
Cancel
this podcast. We figured it out,
guys. We solved.
Savannah's like, y'all should just stop being poor.
Just knock that off. That's your problem. You made a decision to be poor, and this is what happened. This is the result.
Honestly, I decided not to be poor.
These are the hot takes we wanted you to be on the podcast for.
God, please,
just be better. Just be. Could you?
I'm gonna cut that, and that's gonna be an audiogram.
If you agree with
Savannah, it's gonna be your author headshot, and it's just gonna say, "Why don't you just stop being poor?"
But I am quoting Paris Hilton.
Are you?
Shirt. I am. No,
I don't remember this quote.
Sweet Paris
Hilton. God. I also wanted to take this time to offer to any of the listeners who are veterans, and this is probably going to infuriate some people who are not veterans. If you served and you go to the Veterans Affairs and you get 0% disability or higher, if you get rated at 0%, if you get a VA disability rating at all, in certain states, you can go to college for free. Not just yourself, but your children will also go to college for free. So it's called the Yellow Ribbon Program, and you should look into it. Just get a rating at all, and then your children will be able to go to any state college for free.
That's awesome. So, if you're pissed off by that, listener, why don't you go out and sacrifice part of your body or your mental health for our country, and then go bitch about it then. So.
Anyway, I just wanted to give some information because not enough veterans know about that.
Yeah. I will say that's just in general, the assistance programs in our country, we have a lot. I think we need more, but like they don't get any screen time, so nobody knows what's available, and
we need to talk about this stuff more.
Yeah.
We could have an unscripted of our favorite benefits, national park stuff. I could go on for that for a while, but anyway, what?
If you think that's a good idea, listener, you can let us know because we're at our time cap.
Yeah, we are.
It's like an hour.
I was waiting for that.
Sorry. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to close out with?
No, you interrupted me. No, that was it. I was trying to close it out with some information, and then let's get the fuck out of here. So
very good. I think that's good news. I think that qualifies as good news. Yellow Ribbon Program, folks. Doing it out of order. We're just gonna go out here. Check us out.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. We are on Instagram and Facebook, and we can be listened to. John, you want to list all the places that we could be listened to?
Anywhere that you get your podcast delivered to your ear holes. And also you can see our latest episodes on YouTube.
Yeah.
This one,
sign up for
Uncut. Bloopers and
Oh
all.
yeah, there's no editing, guys, because we don't have ain't nobody
You
got
don't
time for
edit
that.
out. You don't edit out the stuff that needs to be edited out anyway, John.
No, he leaves in all the fun
Well,
stuff.
that's a matter of opinion, Savannah.
So you can also sign up for Patreon, where we have some goodies for people who want to get more of us because you love us so much. And yeah.
You can find that link at our website at firesidebreakdowns.com.
Good tag team, you guys.
Boom! We'll be back to you next week where we will continue our discussion on white nationalism, Christian nationalism, Trump, and
Light stuff.
all of this chaotic witch's brew of the things that we've been witnessing in the United States for the last 6 years or so now.
Yeah.
Very, very much looking forward to that. That's been our past 2 episodes. Highly encourage you to go listen to those if you haven't. There's been lots of research done. Robin pulled a rabbit out of a hat, making last episode's research come together so well. And just a reminder, if you didn't catch us last week, Savannah is stepping into an executive producer role, we'll say. She'll be handling more of the research in the background. We'll see her every unresearched episode where she can come and tell people to stop being poor and spread her wisdom across the nation. And we're also planning to do some, hopefully, if people will stop being chickens, do some very interesting special episodes where Savannah gets to do her own thing that she does very, very well and that you can check out at bambooandbananas.com. And very much looking forward to that new project, hoping that we can get rolling on that relatively soon. Until then, though, we really have to go. I got to go to bed because the world ain't going to save itself tomorrow. I'm not going to do it either.
Oh my
but
God.
Don't
All
roll
right.
your eyes.
Thanks, listeners. We'll see y'all another time.
Take care of each other. I'm definitely editing that out of the podcast, though.
Which one?
The world ain't going to save itself.
Oh, really? How come you get to